In a quiet room late at night, a man sat alone with his thoughts. The world outside had fallen silent, and the soft glow of a lamp was the only light in the room. Nothing unusual was happening. Yet something inside him felt strangely restless. For years he had been fascinated by one question that many people rarely stop to ask. What is reality? Is the world exactly as it appears? Or is there something deeper, hidden behind what we see and feel every day? That night, his thoughts were moving in circles, jumping from science to philosophy, from consciousness to the strange mysteries of the universe. He had read about galaxies billions of light years away, about black holes that bend space and time, and about tiny quantum particles that behave in ways no one fully understands. But suddenly, in the middle of all those big cosmic ideas, something simple caught his attention: his breath. Inhale, exhale. At first it seemed like the most ordinary thing in the world, something that happens every moment without effort or thought. Every human being breathes from the moment they are born until their final day. But the man noticed something unusual when he focused on it. The moment he became aware of his breathing, everything inside him began to change. His racing thoughts slowed down. The tension in his body softened. The noise in his mind became quieter. It felt almost as if awareness itself had some kind of power. This simple observation made him remember something strange he had once read in a book about quantum physics. Scientists studying the smallest particles in the universe had discovered something deeply mysterious. When tiny particles are not being observed, they behave like waves of possibility, spreading out as if they exist in many places at once. But the moment someone observes them, those possibilities collapse into a single outcome. In other words, observation seems to influence reality. Physicists call this strange phenomenon the observer effect. For decades, this idea has puzzled scientists all around the world. How can the act of observing something change the way it behaves? What role does awareness play in the structure of reality? The man leaned back in his chair and looked at the quiet space around him. A curious thought slowly formed in his mind. If observation can influence tiny particles, what happens when a human being observes something within themselves? What happens when a person simply observes their own breath? He closed his eyes and tried something simple. He did not try to control his breathing. He did not try to think about anything special. He only watched. Inhale, exhale. Each breath moved slowly through his body like a gentle wave, and with every breath, the silence inside him grew deeper. It felt as if he had discovered a hidden doorway, something so ordinary that most people overlook it every day. Yet the more he observed his breath, the more something inside his mind seemed to shift. His thoughts became clearer, his attention became sharper, his awareness felt stronger and more present. A strange question appeared again, stronger than before. What if the breath is not just a biological process that keeps the body alive? What if the breath is also a bridge between the body and the mind, a bridge between awareness and reality itself? Across ancient cultures and spiritual traditions, people have long believed that the breath holds a special power. Modern science is now beginning to explore similar ideas through neuroscience, psychology, and physics. But the real mystery may be much closer than anyone expected, because the key to understanding consciousness might not be hidden in distant galaxies or complex equations. It might be hidden in something unbelievably simple: a single breath, and the quiet awareness that watches it. The man had begun to notice the quiet power of his breath. It was as if something invisible was unfolding inside him, something he had never paid attention to before. He remembered reading about how the brain works, how thoughts, emotions, and memories shape the way people see the world. But the breath, he realized, is deeply connected to all of this in ways most people overlook. He took another slow inhale, and then exhaled. This time, he focused on the way air moved through his body, the rise and fall of his chest, the gentle rhythm in his belly. With each breath, he felt a subtle change, a calmness that seemed to spread from his chest to every corner of his mind. His heart was still beating, but the frantic racing of his thoughts had begun to slow. A strange clarity was appearing. It was not magic, and it was not imagination. Science explains part of it. Breathing affects the nervous system, sending signals that can calm or activate the mind. Fast, shallow breathing can create stress and anxiety. Slow, deep breathing can create calm, focus, and clarity. The man began to experiment with this simple connection. He tried noticing the pause between inhale and exhale. he watched the slight stillness at the top of the breath and the empty space at the bottom. With each moment of awareness, something shifted inside him. It was as if the breath was a key, unlocking a hidden door inside his consciousness, a door that most people never notice because they are too busy thinking, worrying, and rushing through life. He realized something amazing. The mind is often like a stormy sky, filled with clouds of thoughts and emotions, but when attention rests on the breath, the clouds begin to part, the mind becomes still, like a lake at dawn, reflecting reality clearly. This quiet observation made him wonder, could this simple act of observing the breath actually change the way he experiences life? Could awareness, combined with something as ordinary as breathing, shape reality in some way? He remembered the observer effect he had read about in quantum physics, how particles behave differently when someone watches them, and he realized that something similar might be happening inside the human mind. Observation is not passive, awareness is active. Even the act of noticing can create change. The man began to feel a connection between science and experience, between ancient wisdom and modern research. Breath had always been a part of life, but rarely had anyone understood its deeper potential. Some traditions call it the bridge between body and spirit. Others say it is the doorway to awareness, and modern science is now beginning to see evidence for something similar. When people practice mindful breathing, their brain waves change, stress decreases, and focus improves with every inhale. He felt energy rising in his body. With every exhale, tension seemed to leave him. It was as if his own awareness was reshaping his inner world. One breath at a time, a thought came to him slowly, like a ripple in water. What if the secret to consciousness is not hidden in complex theories or distant stars, but in the simple act of noticing the breath? Could something as ordinary as breathing actually change the way we think, feel, and perceive the world? And in that quiet, the man smiled. He understood that he had only just begun to discover the hidden connection between the breath and the mind, a connection that would slowly reveal a new way to experience reality. And it all started with a single, mindful inhale and a single, aware exhale. The man had begun to feel the quiet power of observing his own breath. But a deeper question now entered his mind. If something so simple could change his inner world, could observation also influence the outer world, the very reality around him? He remembered reading about experiments in quantum physics. Tiny particles, smaller than the eye can see, behave in ways that defy common sense. They can exist in multiple places at the same time. They can move unpredictably. They can even act as if they know when someone is watching them. The scientists called this the observer effect, a strange and fascinating phenomenon. Particles do not behave the same way when no one observes them, but the moment someone looks, their behavior collapses into a definite state. It was as if consciousness itself was touching the very fabric of reality, and this idea both excited and disturbed the man, because it suggested something extraordinary. Observation is not passive. Awareness is not just a witness. It may actually influence what happens. He thought about his own life, the way he reacts to people, situations, and choices. Could it be that human awareness, like the observer in a physics experiment, is quietly shaping reality in subtle ways, changing how events unfold, how emotions arise, how decisions appear? He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with the possibilities. Across history, philosophers and mystics had whispered similar ideas. Reality is not fixed, they said. It shifts and bends depending on consciousness, perception, and attention. But now science seemed to be hinting at the same truth, not through belief, not through stories, but through experiments and equations. The bridge between ancient wisdom and modern physics was narrower than he had imagined. He remembered the breath again, that simple, ordinary process that keeps the body alive. Could awareness of the breath be the first step in exploring this mysterious connection between mind and reality, observer and the observed? The man closed his eyes and tried an experiment on himself. He focused not only on his breath, but also on the thought that reality might respond to attention. With each inhale, he imagined clarity entering his mind. With each exhale, he imagined tension leaving the world around him. A strange feeling arose, subtle but undeniable. It was as if observation itself was awakening something inside him, something that felt connected to the way reality forms. He realized that the observer effect was not just a laboratory curiosity, not just a rule for quantum particles. he realized that the observer effect was not just a laboratory curiosity, not just a rule for quantum particles. It could also be a window into understanding the human mind, consciousness, and even life itself. The mysteries of the universe suddenly felt closer, not in distant stars or abstract formulas, but in the quiet act of noticing, of being present. The observer is not separate from reality. He is part of it, and awareness, even of something as simple as breath, might begin to reveal the hidden rules that shape the world. A shiver ran down his spine as the idea settled. Reality is stranger, and more amazing than most people realize, and perhaps, the doorway to understanding it is always with us, in the quiet, in the present. In the simple act of noticing, he opened his eyes slowly. The room had not changed. The world outside remained quiet, but something inside him had shifted. He was seeing, feeling, and sensing reality in a way he never had before. And the journey had only just begun. The man had begun to understand that observation might influence reality, but now he turned his attention inward. He wondered what would happen if he focused not on the outside world, but on the world within himself. He began practicing something simple, observing his breath with full attention. He did not try to control it. He did not try to force anything to happen. He simply watched, inhale, exhale. At first, the mind resisted. Thoughts kept rushing in like waves, memories, worries, and fears. But slowly, with patience, he noticed something strange. The act of noticing itself created space. A small gap appeared between the thought and the thinker. Instead of being swept away by every idea and emotion, he began to watch them, to see them clearly, as if they were clouds floating across a wide, open sky. With each breath, the noise in his mind seemed to soften. The endless chatter became quieter. He felt a calmness that was not ordinary. It was not the calm of being tired or distracted. It was the calm of pure presence, of awareness itself. It was as if a silent force inside him had awakened, a force that did not need to act, judge, or change anything. It simply observed, and yet, by observing, it began to influence everything inside. Emotions that had seemed overwhelming now appeared more like passing weather. Thoughts that had seemed urgent now seemed temporary. He realized that awareness itself is a power, a force that can transform the way the mind experiences life. The man remembered the observer effect from physics, how particles change when they are observed, and he saw a strange similarity within himself. Observation within the mind was quietly reshaping his inner world, not through effort, but through gentle attention. He began to experiment more deliberately. He watched the rise and fall of each breath. He noticed the pause at the top of the inhale, the pause at the bottom of the exhale. And with each careful observation, something shifted. The restless mind became still, the racing emotions slowed, and a clarity began to emerge, subtle but undeniable. He realized that most people never experience this. Most people are caught in the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. They react automatically. They judge, fear, and chase endlessly. But awareness creates a pause, a silent space, and in that space, choice appears. Choice is the doorway to freedom. The man understood that by observing his own mind, he was not only calming himself, he was beginning to shape how he experienced reality. It was not magic, not superstition. It was a simple truth. Attention matters. Awareness is active. It can create subtle but profound changes inside the mind. And these changes ripple outward into the way life is experienced. He smiled to himself, noticing the simplicity of it. No complicated techniques, no distant journeys, no expensive tools, just the quiet act of noticing the breath, and in that act, discovering the silent force that shapes thought, emotion, and perception. The man understood that he had uncovered a hidden truth, a force that exists in everyone, waiting to be noticed. A force that can transform chaos into clarity, confusion into insight, and ordinary moments into experiences of deep presence. And with that realization, he took another slow inhale and a slow, aware exhale, feeling the subtle power of awareness and sensing that this quiet force might be the key to understanding consciousness itself. The man had spent days practicing awareness of his breath, and now he began to notice something extraordinary. The breath was not just a biological process. It was a doorway, a bridge, a subtle guide to consciousness itself. He realized that the breath exists only in the present moment. The past is gone, held only in memory. The future has not yet arrived. existing only in imagination. But the breath is always now, flowing through the body, marking the rhythm of life. He inhaled slowly, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. He exhaled gently, feeling warmth leaving his body. Each breath anchored him to the present, and in the present, awareness awakened. The man began to see that most of life is spent elsewhere, in regrets, in worries, in endless plans and stories. But with each conscious breath, he returned to the moment. And in that moment, clarity emerged. It was a simple realization, yet profound. The breath is a gateway to consciousness, a way to step outside the endless mental noise, to observe thoughts and emotions without being carried away by them, to touch something deep and silent inside. He began to experiment further, watching each inhale and exhale with gentle curiosity, noticing the subtle sensations in the chest, the rise and fall of the abdomen, the tiny pause between breaths, and with each observation, he felt a quiet awakening. It was as if awareness itself was expanding, stretching into every corner of his mind, bringing clarity where there had been confusion, calm where there had been tension, and insight where there had been distraction. The man thought of the observer effect in quantum physics, how observation influences reality at the smallest scales, and he wondered, could conscious breathing do something similar inside the mind, shaping perception, attention, and even the way life is experienced? He noticed that when he focused on the breath, the mind became more flexible, emotions no longer dominated order, thoughts appeared and disappeared like clouds, and he began to feel a subtle freedom, a sense that he was not trapped in the usual patterns of thinking. This freedom felt extraordinary, yet it was so simple, accessible to anyone who simply paid attention to their breath. No special tools, no complicated instructions, only awareness. He reflected on ancient traditions, how yogis, monks, and philosophers had long taught that the breath connects the body and mind, that it is a doorway to higher awareness. And he realized that modern science and ancient wisdom were pointing to the same truth. The present moment, observed through the breath, is the gateway to consciousness. With each inhale, he felt life entering him. With each exhale, he felt release and clarity. It was as if the breath itself was a teacher, guiding him gently toward a deeper understanding of the mind, of perception, and of reality. The man understood that this was more than relaxation or stress relief. It was a way to step into the silent, observing presence within, a presence that notices without judging, that sees without interference, that connects mind and awareness in a direct, living experience. And as he continued to breathe consciously, he felt a quiet certainty that the simple act of observing the breath could open the mind to a greater understanding, a doorway into consciousness that exists within everyone, waiting to be discovered with awareness, curiosity, and attention. He closed his eyes, inhaling slowly and exhaling fully, feeling the subtle but powerful truth of it, the breath as a gateway, the observer within, and the infinite potential of conscious awareness. The man had spent days exploring the breath, and observing his own mind. He had discovered the quiet force of awareness, the subtle gateway of consciousness, and now he began to notice something even deeper. Reality itself felt different, not because the world had changed, but because his perception of it had shifted. Colors seemed sharper, sounds more vivid. Even ordinary moments carried a sense of presence he had never noticed before. He realized something profound. The observer within the mind is not separate from life. It quietly shapes experience, not by controlling events, but by shaping attention, reaction, and awareness. The man remembered the observer effect in quantum physics, how particles change when they are observed, and he saw a subtle mirror in his own experience. Observation within consciousness reshapes the way reality is perceived. Thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to align with the clarity of awareness, and choices become less reactive, more intentional, more free. He began to experiment consciously. In daily life, simple actions, like walking, eating, or speaking, were no longer automatic. They were infused with attention, presence, and care. The ordinary became extraordinary. The mundane transformed into moments of subtle wonder. With each mindful inhale, he noticed the quiet strength of awareness growing. With each mindful exhale, he felt tension, distraction, and habitual patterns dissolve. It was as if the mind itself was being rewired, not by effort or force, but by the gentle power of observation. the man realized that life responds to the observer, not in some magical, instant way, but in subtle shifts that accumulate over time. Awareness influences perception, perception influences reaction, and reaction shapes reality, a quiet chain that connects mind and world in a living, breathing cycle. He reflected on his journey from simple curiosity to deep insight, from noticing his breath to experiencing consciousness as a living, dynamic force. It was not about controlling reality, but about engaging with it fully, with attention, curiosity, and awareness. The man smiled as he realized the final truth. The universe is not something separate from the observer. It is co-created in each moment through perception, awareness, and choice. And the doorway to this co-creation has always been within him, within everyone. He inhaled deeply, sensing life itself flowing through him. He exhaled slowly, letting go of old patterns and distractions. Every breath became a reminder, a guide, a teacher, that the observer and the observed are intimately connected, and that life can be experienced with clarity, calm, and conscious presence. In the quiet of his room, the man understood that reality is not fixed. It is not rigid or predetermined. It is fluid, subtle, and responsive, shaped not only by external events, but by awareness, attention, and intention. And the simplest way to step into this living reality, to begin reshaping perception and experience, is to notice the breath. Inhale consciously, exhale fully, and awaken the silent observer within, because in the act of observing life with awareness, the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary, the familiar becomes mysterious, and each moment becomes a doorway into the infinite potential of consciousness itself. And with that realization, the man sat quietly, breathing, observing, and experiencing a new reality, one shaped not by chance, but by the quiet power of presence.